Flyers have won the Stanley Cup. The words rang out like a cry of joy to a city starving for a champion. For Flyers owner Ed Snyder, his dream of bringing championship hockey to Philadelphia came true.
And boy, did it come true. It's a shame that 50 years later, they only won one other cup, but I have to thank my special guest here for this special commemorative anniversary, because this coming Sunday, May 19th, it's also a Sunday, is going to be the 50th year anniversary of the Flyers. And that a special day that myself, Carl Candello, he's in California, my cousin Vince Ferrari, he was next to me at section 34, row 9, seat 2, great friend, sports writer for Philadelphia, Sam Carchidi. And the man that was in ground zero in the penalty box was Lou Nolan, who was actually, introducing the players last minute of play in regulation, and Jeff Hare, who's going to be doing a feature on them coming up sometime soon. So, guys, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you, Sam, for organizing this, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We could talk about the Flyers, how they started, but it was our life back in the day. We were late teens, early 20s, and it was a magnificent time. So I will just really go to Lou first, because Lou, that specific day, well, those playoffs, because first with Atlanta, we swept them at 4, and then an absolute battle with the Rangers in 7. And, Dornhofer scoring that goal over Jockerman, the win 4-3, the Dale Roth fight with Schultz that the Rangers never came in and helped him. But what was it like in ground zero? Because you were past the locker rooms, and I would always remember you walking over the ice when you would start the game. You had a cup of whatever beverage you had. I don't know if it was coffee or whatever. But Lou, I'll let you start it off there, because you were at ground zero, buddy. Microphone.
Got it now?
There you go.
Okay. It was a great time. We worked without glass in those days. So the communication was, one-on-one with referees and with players, simply by like 12, 18 inches away. And it was a marvelous day. I remember exactly driving down in the afternoon. In fact, I gave somebody a ride. They were going somewhere, and I picked them up in the car. And I was living in Southwest Philly at that time, and they were going to the game, so I dropped them off. They got there early. I got there on time for me, a couple hours before. And it was just fantastic. I was saying earlier when Orr took the penalty, he had everything to say to the referee, who knew he was going to get it, but he had deserved the 2-minute penalty. So it was it's hard to describe it, Stanley Cup. Little did I know I could take it to work, and I did. I took it to work.
There you go, Lou, to the left with the iconic Schultz and Kelly in the box.
It's a great shot.
Yeah,
yes,
look how low the glass is there. That contributed to 1,000 people being on the ice and causing some chaos with Bernie and Clarkie when they skated the cup. Yeah, geez, I had dark hair then. Here's Schultz again. He was there a lot. We talk about it these days. He spent a lot of time there. But when he used to go in there, he would be so upset. His eyes were like ping pong balls. So and he'd just be so mad, especially if he was fighting. And after the Ralph fight, think about that, what he was like that day. That changed the course of the series, I think.
It's amazing. Now, did you feel, because you would hear a lot of things that obviously it couldn't have been on, but they knew that they had something there after, when they came back from Boston in game 2, and I have to play this because if it wasn't for this particular time, I don't think.
Great goal. I was on that trip. Great goal.
Back to Van Imp, up and over the near red line. Dumps it in, but can't as Marcotte blocks it. Goes to Clark, back to Marcotte, all of this in center ice. Finally, Van Imp does get it in. Flips it to Gilbert. Knocked down in front by Vadnais. Wound around to O'Reilly. Poor check by Clark. Schultz breaks it up. Schultz behind the net. Centers. Flat. Tries to Clark. Shot. Oh! Rebound! Score! Bobby Clark scores! Scores the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of sudden death overtime. He was blocked on the first shot. He made the second one, and the Flyers have picked up their win in Boston.
Amazing.
Without that goal, what we on May 19th probably may not have happened.
Biggest goal in franchise history, I think.
Yep.
I mean, you can argue that it was McLeish's goal to beat Boston or Kelly's goal to beat Buffalo to clinch the cup. But like you said, Carl, if they don't get that goal from Clark, they probably don't get there. They probably lose and they're down 2-0, and I don't think they win the cup. That was a franchise-defining goal, no question.
The locker room after that goal, well, because I was on the trip and went down, was chaos.
You were there.
And the guys knew. The guys knew they had done an amazing thing, and they said, we can win this series. So they were convinced.
See, something
the irony of that goal is that
you were
Schultz
there.
was
That's amazing.
Oh,
I was saying Schultz was out there on the ice, and supposedly the story goes that Fred Shearer was getting heckled by one of the fans saying, why you put Schultz out there? So Shearer puts Schultz out there with Clark and Flett, and Schultz makes the pass that gets Flett in the slot, and he gives it to Clark.
yeah. Oftentimes he's just thought of as a nasty guy who was a bully, but he had pretty good hands. He scored a lot of goals in junior and a lot of goals in Richmond when he played there. So, it's he's pretty good.
He scored the winning goal against Atlanta when they won the fourth
right.
straight.
That's right, he did.
He had 2 hat tricks that year, too, and scored 20 goals.
20 goals.
But Bob Kelly's the same way. Most people think of Bob Kelly as just being a goon. Not true. He had good hands and was a good player, and I think he scored over 20 goals a few
Stanley
times.
Cup winner.
That's right. That's right.
Stanley Cup winner.
Yep.
Only 2 guys have done that, he and Rick McLeish. So,
Well, I'm glad you said that, Lou. He was the Velcro of that team. We really didn't realize how great he was, and I'm sure Boston really wishes they never gave him up. And Vin, my cousin knows, what trade was it that they ended up getting McLeish?
Mike Shaky Walton.
Yeah.
I love that.
Shaky.
What a great nickname, Shaky. But he was a good player. He really was a good player for both Boston and Toronto.
yeah, but McLeish, the way he used to cut in
Right
across
there.
the blue line and wrist shot, he was a money player.
Louis
true money player.
Sway and swoop. Yes.
And the Flyers moved him from wing to center, and the rest is history. I mean, he was the youngest player in NHL history to score 50 goals. And, he was a little aloof sometime. Jeff and I talked to several of the Flyers for this TV series we're working on the Broad Street Bullies. And to a man, they said that McLeish had more talent than anybody on that team. Bobby Clark said that. But he did have to be talked to, several times during the year because he had a lot of natural talent and he had a tendency to kind of loaf sometimes, and Shearer got on him. But as far as talent, he was magic. I mean, there's no question. He had that great wrist shot that Lou just alluded to, going left to right. I can still see that wrister from the high slot, and he was always on target. What a great player. He's a borderline Hall of Famer, I think.
In any sport, though, it's still defense. So it's without that, he was absolutely a magician. He couldn't have been any greater than what he was. But look how he started as a Flyer. And they didn't realize how good he turned out, but it was the tutelage of Jacques Plante as a coach that got him into as great as he was. That was like one of the first years when he was playing with the old helmet he had on.
That would have got
Louis Morrison there.
$5 fine.
Yes.
Supposedly back when Bernie's coach or a tutor said, every time you go down on the ice, you got to pay me $5. And eventually it paid off where I say to this day, he is the best stand-up goalie of all time. Pure step goalie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's the 74-75 yearbook. course, it's the year after they won the Cup, and that's Bernard Marcel Perrant. And love the eyes.
Some fun, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you see that save he made against Kenny Hodge with 2 minutes left. No goaltender makes that type of save anymore. Just kicking the pad. Now it's pad down, pad down. You know, my complaint is goalies are 6'6", 280 pounds, and it looks like a Michelin man covering the goal. I mean, back then, Bernie's what, 5'9", 5'10"?
Yeah, he's probably a little bit bigger, but not much bigger.
You had no upper protection. You had the little knee pads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pat, the equipment was a big difference, Vince. The equipment was huge now compared, but it's totally different. It's stiff and it's
and he kept everybody loose. I know Joe Watson said with about 3-4 minutes left in that game, there was a timeout in Game 6 against Boston, the game they won the Cup, and he skated over to Bernie and he says, "How you feeling?" And Bernie looked at him and says, "A lot of nice broads here today, huh?"
Yeah.
And, that was Bernie. He kept things loose.
Bernie actually called him over, and Joe said he was expected to get some wisdom on how to best finish the game. And he said, Bernie just looked around. He goes, "Just imagine how many broads are watching us right now." That's a thing of beauty right there.
Lou, I want to just bring it back to you. That last period, we're in the stands thinking, wow, one more period to go. Let's score another goal. But we realized we weren't scoring. Boston was just like the onslaught.
Sure.
And you could feel in the stands that, they were coming because, look, they were Hall of Famers. As myself and my cousin would always say, what team, when we walked into the Spectrum, when a team came out for practice, what team intimidated that you were in all of? It was Boston. Because of Orr, Esposito, and all the other guys that they had.
Ashman.
So what was that last period and obviously that last minute like being in ground zero? Because a lot of other things were going on, and obviously you had to still keep your concentration to call the last minute. So give us a little back, thoughts on that last period and the last minute.
Well, just like you folks standing up in the upper bows where you were in section 34, I think you told me.
Yes.
It was the same thing down on the ice. I said, "Oh my God, we got one period left to go. Be nice if the lead was 2-0 instead of 1." But didn't look like it was going to happen. It wasn't easy to keep the composure on everything and get the information out. But I was fairly new at it at that point. It was the year before that I really started PA announcing, so I was new at it, and I had to really pay attention. And you try to be I always told myself, try and be a professional. You're not the show; the players are the show. And the period went on, and it was starting to get better. And then you get to the last couple of minutes. I think maybe 2 minutes and 30 or 2:40 when Bobby Orr took that penalty and hauled Clarkey down from behind on that breakaway. And it was like, hey, we might win this thing. We might win it.
Yeah.
And just the last few seconds, you're watching it, and the chances are coming to Boston, and we're having our chances, not many of them, but we're having them. And Bernie is fantastic. And then Bobby Orr pulls down Clarkey, and he gave the referee so much grief. I think it was Art Scove was the ref then. And boy, he just kind of looked at him. Hey, that's what said, we're going to do it here. We're going to do it. And
they say your best memories are when you're a kid, when you're 9, 10 years old, sports memories. I'd like to hear what Jeff remembers from that. Jeff was a 9-year-old kid growing up in Roxborough and big Flyers fan. What was going through your 9-year-old mind, Jeff?
Thanks,
Thanks. Well, being 9 years old and what was going on in Philly at the time, having a team that was even close to being a winner, was non-existent. The Eagles were terrible then. The Phillies weren't good. The Sixers weren't good. So when the Flyers started to win, and they really, they really captured the heart of all of us that had been waiting. I mean, I'm 9 years old, but I was starved to finally think that I had a team that I liked that could be considered a winner. So I remember I'm watching the game with my brothers. My brother Steve is 2 years older than me, and my brother Doug, who's 3.5 years younger. We're watching the game. We're watching the game. We kept waiting for something bad to happen. It was like, even at 9 years old, I knew that Philadelphia fans are not supposed to have happiness, you know? So
I was feeling that too in the place.
Yeah, we are waiting for something bad to happen. And then when it didn't happen, it was just like an explosion. And we ran around the living room and we're knocking shit over and, you know, and then we just ran out and ran up Fairthorn Street to Ridge Avenue and just watched a very adult party break out, being 9 years old, streaky, lots of beer being consumed, and it was just such a blast. I will never forget it. I will never forget it.
Obviously,
the drama of those last couple minutes, right before the Orr penalty, we saw it right in front of us. That Kenny Hodge shot from the right wing, where that is a toenail save. And in the playgrounds, we tried to copy that, calling it a toenail save. But I've replayed that 50 times in my life, trying to freeze it right when Bernie's right skate, and that thing is ticket. It's either going in the corner or glancing inside the post. But the best save I ever saw. I mean,
I've never heard a groan from a person as when that shot from him next to me. Sam, what section were you in for that game? I know we were in 34. What section were you in?
You know what? I have the ticket hanging up, and I'm not sure. I know the ticket was, I think it was $7.75 was the value. I paid a scalper $40. That sounds cheap. Back then, that was a lot of money. I was working part-time and going to school, and I thought I was nuts, but I said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I got to do this. And it turns out to be the best $40 I ever spent. But
this is the unused ticket.
Unused?
25. Wow.
$8.25.
Yeah.
$8.25.
So our game ticket per season was $7. So it only went up $1.25 for the Stanley Cup finals. So,
as opposed to now where they probably go up over $100 a ticket.
Oh, yeah.
You can't buy a beer at the game for $8.25.
Right.
Well, look at parking. You mean the asphalt got a little bit more expensive to park your car? So it's just total gouging.
Used to be $2.
Well, Lou will understand now that particular day, the euphoria. Now I was in college taking film courses. I had my 8mm camera and I'm shooting footage. I see Van Emp through the moves and everything. I had it on VHS. I don't know whatever happened to it, but okay. Yes, I know.
Forever, yeah.
I would love
So anyway,
to see that.
From that game, Carl?
Yes. I had because we're in Glassboro. I had film course and we had the 8mm. And I said, can I take 2 rolls of 50 foot? And I did. And I had it transferred to, I've moved from the East Coast to could never find it. So anyway, so we leave.
Yeah.
Vince is with me. We go to my cousin's in South Philly. That's, we had the nice little Italian dinner, whatever. But my other cousin Carol, we're sports fanatics. We have tickets to go back to the Spectrum and watch the first lacrosse game of the Wings with Doug Favell on the Wings. And Lou mentioned as we were doing the show that Lou did the PA. So Lou, can you go a little bit talk a little bit more about the celebration in the locker rooms and whatever? And you stayed in the building. Did you even have a dinner break because you were doing the next event?
I have no idea whether I had a dinner break or not. All I know is I had a lot to drink, and the locker room was chaos. Everybody and their mother was in the locker room. Normally, it's now sequestered to different areas where players dress in one area and they go and they do this in another area. But everything those days was in one area. Like there you go. And I mean, it was just amazing. Beer in the Stanley Cup, champagne in the Stanley Cup, everybody taking a drink. Everybody wanted to be with it and take a picture with it. And, faces like that, the guys are just so happy. And, it's amazing. It's amazing. It was chaos. And then that game came along, and I don't know what time it started, but all I remember was that I guess I did okay because they brought me back for the second one. But then that was over. I headed over to Rexy's, and the whole place was blocked off.
Yeah.
The Black Horse Pike was blocked off, and I had to go around the back and sneak in through the kitchen. And boy, it went later and later and later, and I don't remember much after that. It was just chaos and happiness, just plain happiness.
Yeah, we were told the players couldn't get in Rexy's and they went somewhere else. I think it might have been a place called Compton's Log Cabin
Down the street.
Yeah, in Cuthbert Boulevard at Haddon Township. I don't know if you know that place, but do you remember? Did you go to Compton's after Rexy's or no? Do you remember?
I don't know. Getting in Rexy's was tough enough, but moving around in Rexy's was impossible. It was just filled with people getting a drink from the bar was tough. But fortunately, I knew the guys, so they got me a couple of them. And it was it was an amazing time. There'll never be another time like that. Even if we win one at home in one of the coming years, if I'm still there and I'm still broadcasting, I certainly hope I am. But we're headed in the right direction, so
Yeah.
It's interesting that I remember when the Flyers first came about and heard the news media saying that we had Convention Hall, we had seeing the old Ramblers at the old Philadelphia Arena in 46th and Market. My uncle used to work at Abbott Dairies and get tickets for the Ramblers and go see hockey. And we'd always go for the fights because the Eastern League was just mayhem.
That's so true.
Then when the Flyers finally came about, Channel 48 ended up knowing that they were going to have the contract. So the year before, on Saturday nights, they would televise the New York Rangers away games on Saturday night in Philadelphia. And that's where I ended up actually seeing Bobby Hull's 50th goal against I think it was Maniago, Chicago Stadium in 65 or 66. And then subsequently after that, the team was coming about, and then, this somewhere.
Wow.
The new arena.
Action. Yeah, sure.
Wow, that is great. Where did
That
you find
is great. Yeah.
And the iconic building, because I would always say I grew up in Barrington in Jersey, but that was my second home along with my cousin. And, between everything else they had there, it was amazing to be in that building. And then even with the press, that this was one of the first, look who the first announcers were.
Stu Nahan,
Captain Philadelphia.
Captain Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
Channel 12.
Stu and Gene. Yeah, and I think only the third period was televised.
WCAM.
Yeah.
No, only the third period was on the radio.
Radio, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
We would listen to it on Sunday nights. They would have a Spanish program up until about 8:30, and then they would go and you would hear Gene Hart, and Vince would say, Gene would not give the score for almost 10 minutes, and had to go, what's the score? What's the score? What's the score? And then they finally say, Barrington's goal or something. Oh, they're down 7-1 or something like that. But we would still be listening. But then how it evolved to the press with Sam. Look at that iconic.
Meltzer, Tom
Wow,
Brooks.
Joe Pellegrino. Wow.
Yeah, may he rest in peace. Yeah.
Chuck Newman.
Yep.
Well,
Some good people there.
Real good people.
Speaking of that,
I remember listening to the games on the radio. There's Joe. Great guy. May he rest in peace. He passed away a few weeks ago, and I used to golf with Joe. Just a classy guy.
well, here's the one guy that we really haven't spoken about. Robert Earl Clark.
Yeah.
Who the fate of his physical, not disability, but most of the top clubs did not draft him in the 69 draft. And then he finally came in the second round to the Flyers. And my God, thank God that they did. because he's still, after 50, 60 years of the franchise, he's still the greatest flyer ever as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
you can thank Jerry Melnick for that. The scout Jerry Melnick's the guy that spotted him and pushed for him. But yeah, it was he's the greatest flyer ever.
Yep.
At this point, no question about it.
We've got a very
Absolutely.
fun scene in the show that is centered around that draft, and Jerry Melnick really pushing for Bobby Clark, and others in the organization not wanting him.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Yep.
it's actually it's a really fun little scene, but it's also a very good bit of drama too.
Yeah,
My God, how things
I'd
could
like
have
to see that. I can't
I
wait.
actually remember listening to the first game on radio when Clark played, but here's a picture of his first game at the Spectrum.
Wow.
Where are you
He
getting
looks
these
like
pictures at,
he
Carl?
looks
These
like
are
he's
great photos.
16. He looks like he's 16 years old. Look at
He
that.
does.
My
He was
God.
he was actually
He
19.
did, yeah.
Wow.
Well, Sam, it's called pre-production because Jeff knows you got to be prepared, and get everything ready for when you're on there. But I've seen this.
These
picture
photos are
back then.
great, Carl.
Yeah, and I remember listening to the game and like, okay, who's this Clark? And I think it was like November of '69. It was his first year. You can see how short his hair was, and no helmets. Not one player had a helmet on. So it just shows how far back we go. And then from there to that's actually 75 against the Islanders, but I think iconic how he scored the goal and all that. So yeah, it's
That was
so
a series.
you were obviously
right?
in the locker rooms and spoke to him many times, and he was a very humble guy. He didn't have a lot of words. He wasn't really boisterous like a Joe Watson and all those. Give us a little bit background on Bobby and all that, what it was like.
Yeah, I think Jeff set it up in one of our scenes in our TV series called The Bullies. Jeff set it up perfectly as Bobby Clark cutting school and going to play hockey with his buddies, and he did that frequently. And his mom, you pick up the story, Jeff. His mom pulling up in the car, and
His mom pulling up in the car, going to yank him off the rink, and Bobby having a not quite a seizure, but passing out, and that's when the diabetes diagnosis came, and the doctor saying, he could still do lots of things. He could play tennis. He could, he could do a lot of sports, but not hockey. He's not going to be able to play hockey anymore. So it's funny because I just looking at these pictures of Clarky, my son is 13 years old. I use Bobby Clark and what I learned from Bobby Clark when I was 9, 10 years old. I use that for my son now when he's playing soccer. He's a very high level soccer player, club soccer player, and probably the biggest thing that I have taught my son is, everybody loves to win, but what you really want to do is you want to hate to lose.
Yep.
And that's what Bobby Clark had, because everybody loves to win. And this came out of one of our interviews. I think it was Billy Clement said this. Everybody loves to win, but Clarky absolutely hated to lose. And I teach that to my son now. These are lessons that are universal and are going to keep on going on and on and on.
If I can just interject something too, you showed that picture again of Bobby Clark with Joe Pellegrino, and I just noticed, I don't know if you saw it, there's a Stanley Cup on the left. They only used those jerseys for exhibition games in the 74, 75 season because the players thought they were trying to they were showing off in a way, and they were shoving it down the throat. Hey, we're the defending champions. And it was like putting an extra target on their jerseys. So they went to Mr. Snyder and they said, hey, well, with all due respect, because Ed Snyder really wanted them on there. It was his idea. And they said, we just do not want to wear these jerseys. We'll wear them for the exhibition games, but we don't want to wear them in the preseason and in the season. And Ed finally relented. And Lou Scheinfeld was very upset. He said we would have sold 1 million jerseys with the Stanley Cup on it. And but that just shows you, those guys were always thinking, and they didn't want an extra target. They knew they were going to be. Oh, you got to love that picture of it.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Oh my God.
But those players, that they're the kind of things they did. They were always thinking about winning, and they didn't want to give the other team a little bit of an edge, and they thought that cup on there would give the opponent an edge, and they did not wear them for the 74-75 season.
Yeah, somehow, and I'm not sure how, I wound up with one of those patches off a jersey, which I still have in my collection.
Cool.
But it's pretty nice, But I know they didn't like that at all. Players did not like that.
Well, we have to talk a little bit that obviously it was his dream to eventually win, but without Mr. Snyder, Ed Snyder, who was in the record business, and then he was working for the Eagles, and he was in New York at a certain time, and he was invited to a game in Madison Square Garden, and then he fell in love with hockey, and then he realized that Philadelphia was going to get his franchise, and without that man, who we know the stories that it almost went to Baltimore. Can you imagine that, an NHL team in Baltimore? So obviously, Lou, you probably met the man, spoke to him many, many times. It's a shame he's gone and things that has happened with the corporation after that. But back then, about to relive those days with the man who put it all together to finally get to the pinnacle of the award.
Well, no one worked harder at it than Ed. And he used to tell me, I know him from the very first day that there was a game in practice, and all the little kids, his kids running around, around the rink. And he said, call me Ed. And I always called him Ed. But I would call him Ed in the hallway, and people would look and give me the fisheye, out the side, and say, he just called him Ed, come on. But a wonderful guy, could be a taskmaster. One story, I'll tell you a story. I had a bat phone. Bat phone went right to Ed. He could call me when things weren't going the way that he thought they could be with referees and so forth.
Lou, this story's in the show, by the way. I love
is it?
This story is in the show. Yes, I love this story.
Is this the one about the hockey team that? Yeah. The kids.
No, this is the one.
I know. The referee story.
Yeah. When you
was there more than one?
Okay, all right. That one's it. That one's in the show. I love that one.
Well, let's give you that one. It's he referee was Bob Myers. It was chaos, and we work with that glass, so you could be talking to the refs like we're talking here instead of through a little hole. And sure enough, he says, "Louis, give me some paper." So I give him a pad, and he's walking around. He's jotting things down, and now it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Finally, he comes over, and he's got everything written down, and he's going to give me the penalties. The phone rings. I said, yes, Lou, this is Ed. In my earphones, it goes total quiet because everybody wants to hear what's going to happen. He says, one thing that we got to get straight, Lou, between you and me. He says, when I call you, because I asked him, hold on a minute while I took the penalties. And I got back to him, and I said, yes. And he said, one thing we got to get straight. When I call you, you put the referee on hold.
That's great.
And, we talked about it afterward, and I said, yeah, I should never have done that. But he laughed. He laughed. Yeah. And then one time, the teams come on for the, the Mites on Ice, and I'm reading my copy, and I call the wrong team, and the team that goes on the ice is his team, the Snyder hockey people, all the little kids, right? And that he just went berserk. He took up the phone. He says, "What the hell's going on there, Lou? For Christ's sake, do you see who that is?" I said, "Ed, I'm reading the copy. I got all this stuff to read. I don't know. Can't see who it is." And he said, "All right." And he asked me, "Who's responsible?" So I said, "I'll call you back." So I'm on the headset with the guy who wrote the script. I says, "I got to throw you under the bus, Anthony." And he says, "That's okay. Throw me under. It's my responsibility." So I called Ed back, And I said, Anthony Gioia. And he said, Gioia. I said, yeah, Gioia. And he said, okay. So that was turned into when anything wrong happened on the headset, we always heard somebody say Gioia. And it was, I mean, it went to 120 things in the script nowadays, 20 individual items. I don't say them all, but they're all there. And it's quite a operation to put the whole thing together. So
poor Anthony didn't get fired, did he, Lou?
What's that?
Poor Anthony didn't get fired over that.
No, he did well. He's out in Phoenix now, I think, with the Cardinals. So in that building there where they roll the floor in and out for playing the grass, amazing, just amazing.
Well, guys, I have to say we talked about the owner, a good bunch of the players, but without a coach, and they never, never put together. They had the right guy with the right attitude at the right time with the right players, and he was amazing. And they called him what? Freddie the Fog?
The Fog.
Yep.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about him is he never wanted to stop learning. Even after they won the Cup in '74, about 3 weeks later, he took a flight to Russia, and he wanted to learn more about the Russians' game, and he wanted to see it firsthand. And he took his wife with him, and she said she was miserable, didn't want to be there, but he was in his glory because he was learning things that he could, bring back to the Flyers. And I think that's his wife right there, isn't it, Lou?
Mariette. Yeah, that's Mariette. Yeah.
Yeah. But, the Fog was different, and he was very unique and quirky, but he loved hockey, and he just had a thirst for learning, and he had a way with the players. Everybody respected him. I don't know any player that didn't like Fred Shero. And Jeff and I interviewed them all for our TV series. We have 1,000 pages of transcripts, and I don't know one person that had a bad word to say about Freddie Shero.
And boy, did
Fred
we hear
Shero
some
wasn't a
funny
league Fred either.
stories.
He was a minor league. Shero was a minor league, coach, and he was the first guy to have an assistant coach, a Nicoluk.
Yep.
And the first guy to start morning skates. And the writers hated that because you had to get up early and go to the morning skates and then cover the game at night. We blamed Shero for that, but he was an innovator. He was the first one to use videotape to show his players what they were doing wrong. And he was very innovative, no question about it.
Yeah,
we heard a very funny story about Fred. Real quick, is he would carry a briefcase. Lou, you would probably remember this. He would carry a briefcase, and inside that briefcase, he had a tablet like this and a pen and 3 warm cans of Schaefer beer. That's what was in his briefcase at all times.
Yeah, Fred was interesting. He'd always say, I'm going to go watch the films, and
Hey, Lou, you might best know this answer. What was the event in Atlanta where was he mugged in that playoff series outside?
I was on the trip and rooming with Joe Cadillac at the time, and Joe got a call from one of the doctors, and it was on the trip with us. I think it was the playoffs because Mike coached. Yeah,
had a coach.
Yeah, and you get woken up at that strange time of the morning. Say, what's wrong? Joe said, I can't tell you, and he left. And he got back a couple hours later, and all I got out of it was that Freddie was out taking a walk like he always would. He would just go, and he stopped in the bar for a couple of beers, and he was a boxer, so he's a tough guy, and somebody must have given him some grief, and I think he got jumped. I still don't know the real story, but he wasn't looking too good, so he went home, and Mike coached the game, and that's when we beat Atlanta in 4 games.
Right, Schultz scored the winning goal. It was game 4, the clinching goal. Before that, he went home, and Jeff and I talked to all the players, and it's Vince. It's amazing because nobody really knows the story. The person that came the closest was Bobby Clark, and he says what he was told was that he was in a bar and somebody was bad mouthing the Flyers, and they got in a fight, and then other people jumped in. You know, they were in Atlanta, and you know, he had cuts on his face, and he was black and blue, and but that's as close as we got.
There
Joe
are
Watson,
yeah,
Joe
go
I
ahead,
haven't
go
thought
ahead.
about it in 50 years.
Watson said that when they got to Freddie's room, a couch was turned over and lamps were turned over, but nobody else remembers that. Joe Watson was the only one who remembered that part of it. So, Jeff, you wanted to add something?
No, I was just saying that everybody we talked to had a different story of what happened to Fred in Atlanta. So most of them were similar, but I mean, Joe thought the fight had happened back in Fred's room.
In the hotel room, right?
Yeah. So yeah, but everybody had a different take on what happened that night.
Well, luckily, nothing really horrible came out of that. A few scrapes, but when you mentioned that he went to Russia, what NHL team defeated the Russians in '76? That was January 11, 1976 that we attended, and that I didn't pull it up. I should have, but he knew how to beat the Russians and just frustrate them and hit them. And what did they do?
He put up a wall at center ice is what he did, and the Russians weren't used to a dump and chase game, but they had to because they couldn't get in the zone. And the Flyers ended up with, I think, 49 shots to 13. 14. They totally dominated that game.
So, Lou, what's your remembrance from that game? Because obviously you had an interpreter on the other side of the ice for what was going on. And then when they left, because I'm looking at my cousin, what's going on here? He goes, they're leaving. So,
yeah.
What was it like that?
Well, as I recall it, there was the hit by Van Imp, and then Karmeloff went down, sort of got up and looked, and then went down again. And they were all upset that the penalty wasn't called on Van Imp, who now says he ran right into my elbow. That's one of his. Yeah, that's right. You got it. You're right, Jeff. And so there they go, and they're gathered at their bench, and the coach is talking to them. And Lloyd Gilmore was the ref, and Lloyd came over, and he's talking to the guy that's sitting with me as Air Canada rep from Russia, speaks Russian, a guy named Aggie Kuklowitz. Sam, you may have heard that name. I don't know if you've ever heard it. Amazing.
You couldn't make that up.
Yeah. Oh, it's
you couldn't make that name up.
And he said, Aggie, what, we got to figure this thing out. And, we're talking, and I said, well, it's intimidation. They're trying to intimidate you now. And he says, yeah, I know. Give them 2 minutes for delay of the game. So, okay. 2 minutes delay of the game. Roar. The coach all of a sudden says, let's go. And they're gone. Now, Aggie, ref comes over then, and he says, we better get this sorted out, Aggie. You better get over there. So I got to find out what to tell the fans. So I walk over with Aggie, and we're down there, and Ed comes storming up the hallway, bangs right past everybody, bangs in the door right into their room, which smelled like high heaven. Terrible. Equipment must have been very old and very wet. And, a few minutes later, Ed comes out and says, they'll be back in 5 minutes. And he leaves. So, everybody's talking, and they're going to be back in 5 minutes. And I walk over and I say, we'll be soon complete, the period and the rest of the game, whatever. And, sure enough, then Joe Watson scored a goal. Joe Watson scored. He was the next thing that happened. And that kind of broke their back. 4-1, right? Was that the final?
Yes.
Yeah.
We all know what Ed said. He asked, wasn't it the commissioner or whoever, did they get paid yet? No, they don't get it.
It was Alan Eagleson, I think. Alan Eagleson was the guy that put a lot of that series together. I think I'm right about that. Yeah. And Eagleson, they hadn't gotten paid yet, so they weren't going to get paid. And he says, you'll get no money. Leave, go. So I said, well, let's think about this. Maybe we should talk.
Funny story, Carl, connected to that game. They had Lou, you were there, but they had a luncheon to introduce the Russians to the Flyers. And Ed actually had learned Russian through Gene Hart. Gene Hart spoke Russian. and Ed thought it would be nice to introduce the Soviets and to talk in Russian. And but there was so much tension there. There's Gene. So much tension at that luncheon, and they announced all the players. And when they announced Dave Schultz, all the Russians are pointing at him and saying, "That's the guy, that's the guy," and they were being disrespectful. They were talking when the Flyers were being announced, and Ed was so upset that when it was his turn to introduce the Russians, he said, "The hell with this. I'm just going to," he just made it very brief, and he said, "Have a good game," and he didn't speak any Russian. He went out of his way and took a lot of lessons from Gene Hart, but he said, "I'm not going to do that now." He thought they were being disrespected, and he just made a 5-second statement and in English, and didn't care if he offended them. And so there was some hatred going into that game. And as you know,
one story that we heard in regards to that, in regards to the disrespect the Russians were showing the Flyers, is they were all teasing Ed Van Impe because of the way he looked. They were teasing Ed about being old, about him not looking like an athlete. Anytime Ed was mentioned, the Russians all started laughing. So it's just so wonderful that Ed was the one who actually got that all started, and well, Lou, do you remember this too? Because we also heard that at one point Dave Schultz just stood up and glared at them, and they all went quiet. Lou, I think you're muted. Are you muted?
You're muted, Lou.
This is terrible. That's what I'm getting. You got me now.
There you go.
So do you remember that at all?
I don't remember him standing up, but I know there were several times where our guys stared at their guys, and it was quiet. And I think that set the stage for what was going to happen later on, and how we were going to play against them, because they were used to just they were all skating around. If the puck doesn't get in, they all go back, start over again. Well, we wouldn't let them do that, and because Gene Hart helped me with my Russian and all the names, and I still remember those names.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Gene helped me.
Lou, why don't you tell your story about your exchange with the Russians and what you gave them? This is a great story. What you gave them, and then they wanted more the next day. And yeah, you tell that story.
I went to practice, went to see their practice, their skate. Took some time off from work and went to their practice. And standing outside the room, the way the rooms were in the Spectrum, and out comes the guy, and turned out to be Boris Mikhailov, who was our captain, and he gives me a pin. And I said, thank you. And he stands there like he wants something back, right? And he says, for me, pin. I didn't know anything about pins, so I reached in my pocket to show him I didn't have any, and change was there, and I had a Kennedy $50. And he went, oh! So he took the $50 and he went in the room. In about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the door opened and the whole bunch of guys looked out. And then he went like this and pointed to me. They all came over and they're all giving me pins, right? So I said, I'll be back. Stay, be patient. And the guy that's the interpreter, Aggie, is helping them understand. I'll be back and get to them. I went to the bank and I got a couple rolls of Kennedy $50, and I gave them all $50, and I got a whole crap load of pins. Still have them. And while they were out on the ice practicing, the quote unquote doctors, which are really agents, they had a lot of doctors with them. They went through all their pockets and took all the $50, because it was really, the time when Khrushchev and Kennedy were bashing heads together. I guess it was that all came through with that, and took all the money. They took their $50. I don't know what they ever did with them, but players.
But you have your pins.
Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of them. They're great. I got a lot of good stuff from that from the Russians.
So one day the NHL rooted for the Flyers.
It seemed like
exactly.
50-some years, one day.
Clarence Campbell had to smile when it came to the Flyers, because he did not like the Flyers.
He did not like the Flyers.
No.
Well, we talked a lot about a lot of the players, the owner, the coach. But the one who conveyed the grace and ferocity of hockey in Philadelphia was Gene Hart. And forever his inflection, and we heard his call of the Stanley Cup. But Lou, I think this is an early picture of you and Gene.
Oh yeah!
Wow.
Look at that tie! Holy cow!
I'm looking at those lapels, Lou. Wow.
Yeah, you could farm on those. You could plant crops.
But it was his enthusiasm. He educated the Delaware Valley about hockey and its simple rules, and his inflection. And it's ironic that we were in South Jersey at the time, and he was a teacher. I think it was Audubon or Cherokee or one of those.
He was Audubon and Lenape. Yep.
Lenape, right? Mm-hmm. And he was a teacher, but then I think wasn't he the original PA announcer before you, Lou, at there, and then somehow he ended up becoming the play-by-play.
Yes, they knew he had the play-by-play talent, but there was nothing to do play-by-play of, and he was the original announcer. When it got to the point where the third period went on the radio, Eddie Ferenz would sit in for him. Eddie was the hockey guy had a big background with the Devils in Jersey and had played and was the general manager there. They were near the Cherry Hill Arena. Remember those days? Sure. And Eddie would do that. And then Eddie took over when the whole thing went on radio. And then they tried a few different guys, and nobody really worked out, including Gene Kelly from the Phillies. You might know that name from days gone. Sure. And a few other people. Then they settled on a guy named Kevin Johnson, the year before me, and he took the PR job with the Blazers. He thought he'd get a PR job, and he didn't last long. They moved to Vancouver, and they left him there, and that's when I took over the year before the first Cup. So timing is everything. I told Lou Scheinfeld, I want that job, and he brought me in to audition. And in the middle of the summer, they were putting the third level on the Spectrum, and they had these big, low-profile cranes, those big Markham cranes, and sand on to keep the floor from safety with the floor. And I go over there to the microphone, they set it up, and they turn on a crane. Oh. So I turned on the mic and I said, pardon me, guys, really important thing I need to do here. Would you turn the crane down? I got to do an addition. Ying-a-ding-a-ding-a-ding-a-ding. They did. They turned the crane off. And sure enough, Seinfeld said, that's good. I know what your voice is like, because I did the recap of the goals in the press box from the beginning when I worked there. And he says, if that doesn't rattle you, nothing will. And then I got hit with a bucket of pucks my first exhibition game. Somebody threw them to Bob Kelly. And we had them at ice at that point instead of a refrigerator with the temperature taken every time to make sure they were the right temperature. Game has changed.
Yes. Well, I showed this before, but then it's a shame that they never really let Gene be, full. They would have Don Earl there, and it started with Captain Philadelphia and on Channel 48, and he was starting to do them, and Gene was doing the radio games. But through the years, he ended up doing, I saw on YouTube before I was doing prep, he was doing the box lacrosse games on Channel 29. And my cousin Vince and I always used to go to Adams games at the old vet. And when the Adams won the championship in 74, I believe, he was in Dallas doing that game. So he did a lot of other things besides the Flyers. But it's Sam, I might even throw it out. I know we did the one on Bill Campbell a little while ago. That was nice. And July or August is going to be 25 years since he's passed. And I'm just wondering, maybe we could do one commemorative with Lauren, that's just to throw it out to you. But he would put us all together. And I'm sure you, Jeff, you as a young kid, he was part of your, daily routine in your brain. Sports.
Absolutely. And I've got to tell a Gene Hart story, because this is one I had absolutely no idea. And learned this from what is his wife is Sarah, Sam?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So learned this from Gene's wife, that Gene was a comedy diver on the Steel Pier, and she was a horse diver. And that's where they met on the steel pier. And I mean, you think of Gene, and he was always just such a big guy, but he is apparently, back in the day, he's doing a comedic diving routine and diving off of 100-foot tower into the Atlantic Ocean on the steel pier. I mean, that's just crazy.
And Gene was a great athlete in his day. He went to Pleasantville High School and was like an all South Jersey baseball player. And, you know, he was a man about town, though, at Steel Pier. He introduced like Frank Sinatra and some of the most, you know, famous singers of all time. And who would have thought he'd
become an opera singer too?
Loved opera. Loved opera.
Yeah, opera.
Oh,
yes.
Sam, you got to tell the story, Lauren's story about whether to know how they won or they lost. That's because that's
that was a great story. We went to Lauren Hart's house, Jeff and I, and she said that you know, she'd be in her room and laying in bed, but she didn't go to sleep yet. She wasn't allowed to go to the Spectrum during the when they had night games. She went on the weekends. So Gene would come home late at night. It'd be like 11 o'clock. She's still in bed. And she said if they won, he would come into the house with his cigar, light up a cigar, and put on, I guess it was opera music, right, Jeff?
No, that's if he came in smoking the cigar, she knew the Flyers won.
Right.
The Flyers lost. Yeah.
Right. If they lost, he put on the opera music. It was like a tragedy. You know, it was like, you know, she would hear that. So she knew by their senses, by the smell, they won. She smelled the cigar. And if they lost, she could hear the opera playing. And that was a cool story. She was probably, you know, 10, 11 years old at the time. And of course, she's a legend in her own right now. And
Jeff
been the Flyers anthem singer for a long, long time and does a tremendous job.
Jeff, one of Gene's sayings that I loved the most was, "They poke at it." You know, when the puck was in the crease, and everybody was after it.
Right on in.
Yeah,
they poke at it.
They poke at it. They came at it right in front. Yeah.
Well, just to remind everybody, because actually we're all, Jeff, you're in LA. I'm here in Canyon Lake, about 70 miles from you. And the rest of our guys, Lou, Vince, and Sam, are back in Jersey. And we have people all over the country. But
Lou's in Pennsylvania, actually, right?
Last time I checked, I was there.
Well, you're in the Eastern time zone, okay? But we're here for, again, the 50th anniversary, which will be this coming Sunday, May 19th, for the Flyers winning their cup. And I think this is going to play okay, but I think we're going to just let the players and maybe some reminiscing of this couple-minute clip here. See if
it was pivotal that we won Game 6, because Game 7 in Boston would have been a huge climb.
To help ensure victory, the Flyers brought their good luck charm, Kate Smith, to the Spectrum. Her pregame rendition of God Bless America was a tradition started years earlier.
We had a vice president by the name of Lou Scheinfeld. And on his own, without really talking to anybody, he noticed that there were people that were not standing for the national anthem. So he decided to play God Bless America, Kate Smith's recording. And everybody stood up. And of course, we went on to win the game. So I said to Lou, look, we won the game, so I never want to know when you're doing it. Just do it when you think you should. And he would pick specific games and play God Bless America, and our record was outstanding.
Well, when Kate Smith sang, the roof came off. If you don't get a few chills and there's something wrong with you.
Well, I think it electrified pretty well everybody in the whole building. And once the building got going, you know, it gets you going. You know, you're not really nervous, you're more like pumped up.
And shortly after Kate's stirring rendition,
we're in the right-hand corner. Yeah, no, it was against Greg Shepard, and I won the draw back to Moose DuPont. I was lucky to tip it, and it just changed directions enough to screw up the goaltender and go in the net.
The Flyers clung to their precarious lead as Bernie Parent made save after save.
It was in the third period, and we had a face-off in our end, and I skated by Phil Esposito, who was going to take the draw against Oris Kinderchuk, and Phil turned to me and he said, "We're not going to score on that guy tonight." That was Bernie Prawn, and he instilled that kind of confidence in us. But when you not only instilled it in us, but intimidated a team or put that kind of doubt in a team's mind, that's pretty significant goaltending.
A short while later,
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers have won the Stanley Cup!
Fans that were outside in the parking lot listening to the games. When the game was over, the doors were opened. And that's the fans that came on the ice, because there was tons of fans. We couldn't really skate around.
People would not leave the building. They would not leave the area. And people from all over Philadelphia were coming down to the building.
You have to bring yourself back to Philadelphia in that time. The Eagles had won in 1960, and then it pretty much gone downhill ever since. The Sixers had one of the worst teams in history in the early 70s, and the Phillies weren't quite to the point where they started to grow into the mid-70s and into the late 70s. And so it was a sports town dying for a championship.
Well, it's best to relive that in their own voice. But I have to say one thing what Jim Jackson said, and I think I mentioned it to Sam and my cousin Vince, that yes, Philadelphia was starved for a championship, and maybe another podcast down the road, they forgot the Sixers won it in 67. That's the forgotten championship. I think maybe we should do a little research on that.
Didn't they just disband the team the next year, though? I mean, they pretty much got rid of everybody the next year.
Yeah, but they still won the championship with no
Carl, but
parade.
that was ancient history because they were 9-73 the year before the Flyers won the Cup. Right. So that's what everybody remembers. I mean, yes, they won. A great team, one of the best in NBA history.
Yeah, but back to this great celebration. So let's hear about who all went to the parade. I was there. I was at both parades. Jeff, were you at the parade?
I wasn't allowed. Don't bring that up.
I wasn't. I had to work.
I had an exam at Glassboro State College, so I couldn't go. But I did go to the second one. But I just want to say, as we watched the last seconds of that game and the clock going down, 3-2, it froze for a second, and then they just ran it off. But Joe Watson had the puck behind his net, and he said to me, I wish I would have kept it. But he said, Terry Chris, he said, that bugger, he came over and he took the puck. I think Watson gave it to the referee, and then you'll see, if you play it back or if you look at it later on, you'll see that Terry Chris sneaks in there and takes the puck.
You could see that, yes.
I think Chris to this day still has it. And
hey, Sam, somebody said that Bernie may have said that shot from behind the red line by Orr, he never saw it. He says if that would have hit the corner, it would have gone in. Yep. Can you imagine?
He told us that too. He did.
Bernie said that, yeah.
Wow. I've heard that from him. But
we wouldn't
be heard it hit the boards
if that went in.
Wide.
So can I just also say, just watching that, can we please bring back Kate Smith? I mean, what the hell?
Amen.
I mean,
Amen.
I'm sorry if I'm going to take it politically incorrect here, but for the love of God, can we bring back Kate Smith?
They're working on it. You can tell. I mean, they did sing "God Bless America" at one game this year, and the
alumni game.
Yeah, exactly.
We have an Academy Award nominated actress ready to play Kate Smith too. If we can get this thing happening. Kathy Moriarty.
That'd be great.
from Raging Bull wants to play Kate Smith. So
Wow.
Remember,
yeah.
Sam, when I called you 2.5, 3 years ago, and you wonder why am I calling you, and I was so irate about all that, and I said,
Oh, it's terrible.
if Mr. Snyder was still alive, would that have happened? You said, obviously not. It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, no question. No question.
On a positive note, I did go. I was at Glassboro, but I don't think I went to any classes. I have 2 personal pictures from the parade. He was in the caluche with his wife.
Yeah.
That's on Chestnut Street.
You took that photo?
God.
And that's
I was in 2 parades. The one on Chestnut Street that started at the Spectrum. Rip from the city told us as we gathered there that we're going to go about 30 miles an hour till about Spruce Street, and then the crowds will start to happen, and then we'll drive down and go to the mall and all this, and Kate will sing. Well, as soon as we went outside and got in those convertibles, it was chaos from the very beginning to the very end of it. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
Well,
yeah, so they learned from that, though, and they put them on flatbed trucks for the second one.
Second one, right.
Now, someone just put their hand up as soon as I took this picture where Gene had that bottle of champagne. So,
yeah, all the cars had a couple of bottles of champagne in it. Every car.
Story about Bernie, they're going down Broad Street, and Bernie had too much, a lot of liquid in him, and he had to relieve himself. And he actually went to someone's house that had a home on Broad Street if he could use the bathroom. And obviously, they graciously they said they didn't clean that toilet for 2 months after that.
And they bronzed the toilet seat and hung it up.
Yeah, exactly.
That was their row home in South Philly. Yeah. Bobby Clark and his wife, and they were like scared that they were going to be injured. The kids were going to get injured, so they left the first parade early. And we talked to all the players and family members, and they said they were actually terrified.
Scary.
That somebody was going to get hurt because, as you said, there were hundreds of people just converging into their convertibles and jumping in, and Don
Selesky had his sleeve ripped off of his jacket that he was wearing.
Amazing.
Yeah, you don't see Ricky smiling too much there. He's just his arm out, but thinking maybe his arm's not going to come back. So anyway, well, let's just have a personal note that, on this day, I know it's going to be 50 years come Sunday, but thank God that we were so lucky to be actually in the building. Thank you so much, Lou, for being here, because you were in ground zero there. And, some parting comments about those days, because obviously the world's changed in many, many facets, but obviously we're fortunate enough to still be here at our age now and to relive it. And so Jeff, take it as a 9-year-old now. So you're 59 and still trying to do something to, put this piece together. Tell them about what you're trying to put together for the Flyers.
Well, with Sam, we're putting together a TV show called Bullies, and it's going to be a 2-season show, 8 episodes a season. It's not a documentary, as Sam said. It's similar to what HBO did with the Lakers with Winning Time. Only we're not going to disparage anybody like they did with Jerry West. So there's just so many wonderful characters that were a part of those teams. And to me, and I pulled this out earlier, but this is what I've always told people, that this is what it's about. That's what the show is about right there, is love, because these teams loved each other. They went above and beyond for each other. And because of the way they were, they caused an entire region to fall in love with them, and still 50 years later, we're still talking about them. It's not just a team that won a championship. This is a team that made an entire city feel good about themselves again. And that's what our story's about. You know, it's about that kind of, these crazy Canucks came in and made a city that had considered itself to be a city of losers at that time. They made them feel good about themselves again. And they did it in a way that nobody had ever done before. So that to me is just the most interesting part of it. But to me, it's just still comes down to that. It is about love.
Go ahead, Lou.
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me together with these guys to listen to what they have to say, and for talking a little bit about some of the greatest times in my life, sports-wise. And I had a blast for those 2 years, and we won 2 cups. I'm still having a blast. It's been 50 years since. 50 great years for me, besides what I did prior to that, I'll tell you. But as I said earlier, I did take the cup to work in that first year, and it was a bit of chaos when I walked in the building with it. But I wouldn't have been able to do that at all without these guys who are now my friends, who, as Jeff said, have a true love for one another and still hang out together once in a while. The alumni is very strong here, with Brad Marsh leading it. Oh, look at that.
That's great.
Son of a gun. Yeah, Willie. There's
Mays.
the Hound, myself,
saved
and Joe
the best for
Cadillac,
last.
Willie Mays.
Save the best for last.
That's Pleasantville. We played in Pleasantville against
wow.
the
That's
casino.
Joe Cadillac on the right.
Yep.
The PR director at that time.
Yeah.
And Willie
That was
Mays
great. So thank you, guys. And thank you, Carl.
94th birthday. Well, Sam, I still got to give Sam plugs, where he's a great writer with books, and how I did meet you, Lou, before I moved out here to California. And Sam, we're going to plug this book. I don't know if this is still in out there.
You still get it on Amazon, sure.
Yep.
Okay. Because I
had a good subject. I had a great subject.
Thank you, Sam. You were able to write it all down and make sense of what I said.
We had fun doing it, Lou. We had a blast doing it, and Jeff and I are having a lot of fun putting together this series on the Flyers. And Jeff came up with a great tagline. Of course, the Flyers were loved in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia area, but they were despised all around North America, and drew record crowds wherever they went. And Jeff's tagline is, "Get ready to fall in love with the bad
guys."
Yeah, get ready to fall in love.
That's very good. I like it.
And we think people will. And our story, as Jeff alluded, is it's probably more about the players' lives off the ice and what Bobby Clark went through with his diabetes, and it's probably 25% hockey, but we want just the everyday person to really enjoy watching us, even if they're not a hockey fan. I mean, hockey is, a big part of it, obviously, but we want people to learn about Ed Snyder, what he was like, what he went through to buy the Flyers, and his family life and all the obstacles he had to overcome. We want people to get to know Bobby Clark and what he overcame. We want people to know Dave Schultz and be surprised at what he had to overcome. And I won't give anything away, but and there's so many good stories. And as Jeff said, there's such a colorful group of players. I think in a way, and this is no disrespect meant to today's athletes, but players back then didn't have to deal with social media. Players today have to deal with social media, and they're very politically correct. They're afraid to say anything, because if they say the wrong thing and it gets on, God forbid, it gets on somebody's phone, and in 5 minutes, it's all across the world, that video. So players back then, they were more open, and they're still open to this day. Jeff and I had a great time interviewing the bullies and their family members and their kids. And it was just a different time. And I think that's going to come across in our Bullies TV show too, the fun they had. And I'm not so sure players today in any sport have as much fun as athletes had back in the 1970s. But
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Pressure.
Right.
And everybody's got a camera.
What a great time. And I feel so fortunate to have, lived through it and to have experienced it. And as I said, best $40 I ever spent on that ticket from a scalper. Very thankful.
Well, I want to say thankful for you, Sam, because through all these years, it's more than 50 years, because we actually had our little first met at Glassboro State. We had that Sunday night sports show on WGLS, and we were just pulling copy and just having fun for 2 hours. But I wanted to say thank you. I know, Jeff has reached a good pinnacle, and I wanted to do that back in the day, but life got in the way. But I think I want to thank you and the Inquirer, and actually the Flyers, for allowing me to do that documentary I did for you 12 years ago. And I had a camera guy there, but I had my regular camera, and I think I took this picture. And everybody who sees this, Sam has a heck of a career, but this was you in action, Sam, I think at your best, So I just wanted to just say thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. My hair's a little bit darker there. Not too much, but a little bit.
Yeah. To actually, because back then, Jeff, they were doing documentaries on players and this and that. And I said, nobody ever done a documentary on a sports reporter. And Sam thought I was kidding. I said, no, I had a video guy, a camera, and we went, and, you find out who was truthful. I had to, do a lot of things to get the thing edited, but it's up on YouTube, and I think it came out pretty good.
And the Flyers are led by Zach Hill. They're very gracious to us. So I got to give a plug out to
I can't believe it's 12 years, but I do thank you. And I think, Lou, a couple of times I passed you in the hallway that 5 or 6 weeks, and you were very gracious. Said, hello, how you doing? Wondering, who is this guy? But you guys were all great. So I just want to thank you and look back at that. So,
sure.
Jeff, anything we could do to promote when it's finally finished? Just give us a timeline. When do you think we could possibly see this on the screen?
Well, we're not quite sure. I mean, we're taking it out to the studios within probably the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we're going to get initial feedback. This has been a labor of love for Sam and I, and we are hoping that people wind up falling in love in the way that we have been in love with it. So I absolutely 100% believe that they will, because all of the elements are there. It's an underdog story, like Rocky was an underdog story. It's got the slap shot kind of elements, which people still keep going back to. And it's got that wonderful popular 1970s feel that populated films like Boogie Nights. So it's got all of those elements to it. So we feel very confident about it.
Yeah, and I should also give a plug to Susan Blanchard Ryan. She's part of our team. And Lou, I don't know if you know Susan, but Ron Ryan's daughter. She's an accomplished actress. She now works behind the scenes. She's been in a lot of movies, Open Water, and probably 24 or more, and even more TV shows. And she's now working behind the scenes, and she's part of our team. And I'll tell you what, she knows both sides. She knows not only show business, but she knows hockey. Probably knows
hockey
as much or more than any of us. And so she's going to be presenting this to different studios and networks, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have her as part of the team.
Yep, she keeps Sam and I out of trouble too.
She does.
she absolutely does.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I want to just say, once you get certain progress and you want to get some little promotion, I would certainly hope you would come back on again and give whatever updates you could give for anything you and Sam, because Sam's been very gracious. I know he's got a very busy schedule, but he made time out for a couple of these podcasts. It's actually been really great for me to be able to do this, because this is a labor of love too, because when you love something that's not work. And I think maybe as my mother always says, I'm a late bloomer. I'm 70 years old, but I'm finally doing what I really want to do. So I want to thank all you guys for being here. And so just let us know, Jeff, when you want to do some more promotion. And if you ever want to meet somewhere, I'm not that far from you. So I'd love to maybe meet with you one day for coffee or for a lunch.
Carl, let's do it. I do a lot of traveling through California with my son's soccer team. So,
cool.
Let's do it.
Lou, you think one day at the building we'll see the Stanley Cup again, not with another team, it'll be the Flyers? Mike, microphone.
Things driving me crazy.
There you go.
Have it? You have it?
Yes.
Yeah, we made some progress this year. We were better than people thought, and then because of that, in the end, you're thought about as not having such a great year, but it really was a pretty good year for the Flyers. And there'll be changes, and there'll be good changes, and Danny will make them along with Jonesy, and Dan Hilferty will look over it, and they'll do the important things to run the shop. So I think we are going to have one. I hope I'm still around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we all do. And I want to thank my my brother from another mother, that we would love our. What did we say, Vince? Hockey was our God. So, and I hate to even bring this, but it was like when you're a teenager, guys, and people try to find where their niche is going to be, who's going to be into autos and girls and this and that. And we finally found our niche into sports. Yes, we were into music, but this was really amazing. And I think Sam also had that also, not only starting with baseball, but when the Flyers came in, man, it was like 100% at that point. So I want to thank all of you for being here. Is there anything that we may have forgotten that I know you could probably spend another, you're doing a feature on the whole thing, I know, Jeff, but just in this little podcast, is there anything else maybe we didn't mention?
Well, I think there's maybe one thing. People, because of the nickname too, Broad Street Bullies, people tend to think that team won because of its physicality, and that could not be. Yes, that was a part of it, but that cannot be further from the truth because this team was so talented. I mean, when you think of Hall of Famers like Bernie Perron, Bill Barber, Bobby Clark, and you have guys like Bill Flett on the first Cup winner, 41 goals, Reggie Leach on the second Cup winner, Ross Lonsbury, one of the most underrated players in Flyers history, Gary Dornhofer, Jimmy Watson, Joe Watson. I mean, I could go on. Van Imp was so steady. Barry Ashby before his unfortunate eye accident. I could go on and on. Ricky McLeish, who as I mentioned before, is a borderline Hall of Famer. Urs Kindrachuk, Selesky, 20-goal scorer. I mean, this team, yes, they played with grit, and they weren't afraid to fight, but they were very talented. I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle. I don't know if you agree with that, Lou, but
I do.
That was an excellent team. I mean, let's face it. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. But I hope people don't just think of that team as being Slapshot 2, because some people have that, people that didn't follow the team closely have that in their mind that this was just a team that ran over people. That's not the case. They were a very talented group, no question.
And on top of talent, so incredibly hardworking.
Yeah.
They worked so hard. They were not afraid. Nobody on that team was afraid to go into a corner. They were hard working. So,
Bobby Clark,
talented. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to the 70, 71, 72 season when the Flyers did make the playoffs against St. Louis. And I think, Lou, you probably knew that St. Louis took umbrage with the Flyers because they were supposed to be a fast-skating team with the French line and all that, but they were not physical. And I think after Claude Laforge threw, was it Bartley Plager or somebody that actually ruined his career, and Ed Snyder said this will never happen again, and he wanted to toughen up his team, and that's the reason why. I'm sure you can
hard, right?
Well, the funny thing
Clark
is,
was one of the guys, the Plager brothers. There were a couple of them.
Noel Picard.
Noel Picard.
The funny thing is, the Flyers, the impetus to them, winning the Cup in a way was one of the toughest goals against them in not only Flyers history, but NHL history. Jerry Meehan scores with 4 seconds left in the season to knock the Flyers out of the playoffs in 72. And, that was a crusher for any Flyer fan and even more so for them. But the next year they came back, and not only did they make the playoffs, but they won a series for the first time. The famous Gary Dornhofer overtime goal, and a statue's been built. And, they beat Minnesota, and that was a game winner. There you go. Boy, you're on top of it.
Perfect. You are good, Carl.
You are good. And then they took Montreal, a team that was, expected to roll over the Flyers. Flyers win 1 of 2 against the powerful Canadiens. And then they come home and they end up losing the series in 5 games, but 4 of them were 1-goal games. And in the other one that they lost by 2, they actually had the lead with 10 minutes to go. That was a really close series. The next year they won the Cup. That kind of set the scene. And I'll never forget this. I was at the game as a fan, and the Flyers had won their first series ever against Minnesota, and they did that on the road. Then they split against Montreal. And it was mighty Montreal. I mean, it was an upset just that they were competitive with Montreal, let alone win 1 of 2 games, and they could have actually won 2 games. They came home at the Spectrum for Game 3. I've never heard ovation. This is the pregame warm-up. The fans just stood and cheered, standing ovation for at least 10 minutes. And I talked to Gary Dornhofer about this. I guess we interviewed him about 6 months ago, Jeff. He said it's the second loudest he's ever heard the Spectrum. This is for a pregame warm-up. The fans were thanking them. They were so thrilled that they won a series. They were going head-to-head with Montreal, and you couldn't tell who was the better team. And I remember Dornhofer looking up at the crowd like, what is going on here as the warm-up was going on. And Dornhofer says when they won the Cup against Boston, that was the loudest he's ever heard. But this was the second loudest. It was during a warm-up. So, that's a roundabout way.
Right back to that right there.
Amazing fans. Amazing fans.
There you go.
There's one thing that I have to put up that I see two pieces of tape here. That the Flyers, when out visiting teams used to come into Philadelphia, they started the Spectrum flu. And
Fire flu, yeah.
Philly flu.
Yeah, Philly flu. And I think there was one game that I think it was December of 73, the year that they did win a Cup, and myself and my cousin Vince were there. And this is the cover, the front page of the Daily News the next day to show how tough the team was, and when something happens against the team, what happens to you.
Barry Cummins,
yeah. Yep.
And we witnessed this, and you could just see his look, and like every person on the Flyer roster had a shot at him, even Van Imp and Nolay. Simo Nolay actually went after him too. And this is the back page of it.
Yeah, because he attacked Bobby Clark, hit Bobby Clark in the head. And he was their meal ticket, Clarkie, and they didn't like that, and they went after Cummins.
Yeah,
he deserved it. He deserved it.
Total mayhem.
That's also a big part of the show. That's in the show as well.
I can't wait.
Just to show how tough it was, but that's where it came from. But it's great memories, and I thank you again, Lou and Jeff and Sam and my cousin Vince for this.
Thanks,
yes, and I just want to mention to you guys, don't go off Leave Studio yet because everything has to download to their server. So if you could just hang after I do the end of recording, we could talk a little bit, and I'll let you know when we could all go. But thank you once again, and hey, 50 years of memories. I really loved it, and I think maybe we'll be talking soon about the TV production with you, Jeff and Sam. And Lou, again, thank you so much. And Cuz, we'll be talking soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.